Critical Velocity is a driving game for the PS2.
お前が無茶ばかりするから前の街を出る羽目になったんだぞ。
ちょっとあんたたち、私たちはベルゾキャット。
この町ではこいつらに好き勝手はさせんぞ。
オールドロジャーのメンバーに逆らうとどういう目に遭うか思い知らせてやるよ。
すみません、ちょっと人を探しているんですが。
A lesser-known open-world outing from the Ridge Racer PSP team, this was Namco's first, and not their last, but their only released attempt to break into the GTA-style open-world game trend. I still pray for you, Frame City Killer.
Thank you for saving my life. Goodbye.
Critical Velocity takes us on the ride of a lifetime, cruising through the streets of Prio City, a coastal metropolis located in the nation of Falconia. You may already begin to notice some influence from Ace Combat in the game's employment of a fictional place patterned after real-world America. After getting chased out of their last city, Saul and Gordon, two young stormers, drivers for hire for any job from delivery to escort services, otherwise known by their group name Spikehawk, are out putting up posters and looking for work in their new home when they pass by two mysterious women on the run from the cops. Saul, in his infinite wisdom, decides to lend them a hand. This first encounter on the streets of Prio marks the beginning of an epic crime journey filled with blood, betrayal, and burning rubber. But before we get into that, let's talk about how this game plays. First and last open-world game is a dicey set of words. What did they set out to accomplish? What did they fail at? In this case, the answer is funny because I don't think the game fails at much at all. While Critical Velocity leans a bit more on the driver's side than the GTA, locking you in your car, the world itself is beautiful to behold and the cars handle like a dream. It's not all that complex, but that lack of complexity actually works out to be a big strength. Given you're not locked to a single track like in a traditional Ridge Racer game, the cars have to handle a bit differently, but they retain the same sense of precision and tight steering that makes the main series so fun to play. Driving is simple and it feels great. Once you get a handle on the handling, you'll be pulling pretty exciting drifts and turns all over the place to outmaneuver and efficiently navigate the world around you. The drifting itself is the biggest difference from its racetrack-based older brothers. Without a track to lock you to, the drifting necessarily has to be much looser, which does mean you lose out on the crazy swings that real Ridge Racer cars love to do when drifting, but Critical Velocity system works well for its own purposes. I rarely felt like any issues pulling off movement were anything but the result of my own inexperience, either with the controls or with a given car. Oh, I almost forgot to mention nitrous. It's inherited from the PSP Ridge Racers, but it works a bit differently. Instead of being 3 meters you fill up for 3 bursts of nitro, you have a single unified red nitro meter that builds up a bit every time you do certain stunts. And as long as there's any meter in there, you can get a boost for as long as you hold the button. All in all, it works a bit more like Burnout. Once you hit really high speeds, passing a single car will grant a pretty hefty chunk of nitro. Nitro itself isn't the most important thing ever, but it's valuable to have in the harder races for maintaining speed while cornering. Of course, as you progress in the game, you also gain access to different shops to buy new cars from. Every car has a set of small boosters you can purchase, but they're not much more than a little boost. This isn't Racing Lagoon. You won't be picking one car and tuning it up to infinity. As you progress, shops will update to let you buy higher grades of cars you already own, and this is the most crucial thing to remember in the later game. They can get pretty expensive, but the upgrades themselves are worth far more than the slight tune-ups. Your standard Grade 1 cars are inevitably going to be outclassed by the more intense later game mission design. Buying cars means you need money, which means you need to find ways to make it. Being an open world game, you've got your share of side missions to find, which are all fairly basic and short. They give a decent payout, but they're not necessary. Playing just well enough in main story missions, enough to get S and A ranks, will reward you with massive payouts. You can finance all the thrifty car purchases you need with that alone. Oh yeah, the missions. There's about 26 of them, and they stay on the plain side, usually boiling down to simple races, destruction, or escort quests. Thankfully, they are rarely too hard to clear, and sometimes offer an interesting bit of freedom, rarely locking you down to a specific route, and often reminding you that you can pick out your own if you find a better one. There's a few times where the game actually does anticipate alternate routes, and places some special obstacles or events along them. I'm also a fan of the Ace Combat-style briefing sequences. They're unvoiced, but you do get some color commentary from Gordon, and they do a good job balancing him being informative and joking around a bit. I had fun reading a lot of these. Side missions, of course, are all totally optional, and you can very easily get through stopping for very few of them, and should you choose to stop for it, you get plenty of odd and entertaining little conversations. I'm a big fan of this taxi driver who gives you his taxi because he's decided he wants to change his life and become a bus driver instead. They all attempt this kind of small, early Yakuza sub-story type, low-key comedy beat, and they're usually cute enough for just stopping to read the dialogue to be a fun time. The world itself has a pretty good mix of longer, more open roads and smaller, tighter alleyways and side roads to burrow your way through, and that's just talking for the city itself. As you go along, you unlock a few more side areas that are pretty impressive in scale. The upper coastal area has some longer, more winding stretches of road, complemented by its nice summer beachy vibes. The mountains out west feature some of the game's roughest terrain. They're kind of the most annoying to navigate, but you only come up here on occasion, and with how cool this area looks, especially this little side path through this abandoned gold mine, I was never upset about it. The last area you unlock, this sandy desert place up north, forms into a nice clean little loop and lets you crash through some abandoned Old West towns. It's a fun variety in theming. But with how wide these start to stretch out the map, the main fear you might have is how long it could take to drive across all these massive chunks of land. And thankfully, that ends up being less of a problem than it seems. There's no fast travel in Critical Velocity because by the time you've unlocked these locations, you've got cars fast enough to blaze across them in a matter of minutes. Getting around Critical Velocity's world is just smooth and easy enough to always be more fun than annoying, and it's so packed with detail as to always look pretty stunning. It strikes a good middle ground. It starts small and gets bigger, but never gets too big. The only thing I can really think of to complain about that much is, as usual, the cops. They're not as stubborn as a game like GTA. There's no wanted levels. They'll just start chasing you if you drive by too fast. But they can be pretty clingy, and it never feels good to be arrested. Oh, and if you're wondering if you can run over pedestrians, well, they just kind of pop out of existence if you do. While not as technically impressive as a game like Gran Turismo, Critical Velocity seriously pulls its weight in how bright and colorful it is. There's this consistent arcade-like charm to how the game presents itself. It's not so much going for realism as it is presenting what it would be like to live inside the world of a Namco game circa 2000s. As the light blue haze of the game's low draw distance fades the towering skyscrapers and grassy hills of its world into view, the game crafts such a believable and intricate sense of place. I only moved away a year ago, but it really authentically brought me back to living in California, the trips to San Francisco my family would take every few years. It captured the energy of this place in a way that made me feel way more excited and nostalgic than GTA ever has. A part of that excitement, admittedly, comes from the game's upbeat and jazzy soundtrack. This is the kind of game where they have one specific song, and most of the music is variations on that song. And you're gonna be hearing that song for most of the game, and you will absolutely never be upset with that, because the song is just that good. There are other songs, though, and the other songs are really good too. Critical Velocity's soundtrack is a who's who of PS2-era Namco composers, and every one of them knocked it out of the park. That said, if you ever do get tired of the open-world music, you can change it. I never did. The biggest contributor to those positive vibes, though, that has to be the skyboxes. Critical Velocity has some absolutely stunning skyboxes, a unique one for most every zone. The vast, cloudy skies of Prio City alone give the game such an incredible sense of scale, and in some areas the clouds get really dense and cover the whole sky in a dim, grayish blue. When you go into the mountains, you get to see those ranges really reaching out in the distant horizons. It's obviously just a low-resolution image, but even seeing that, they blend so much to creating this sense of scale and space that makes Critical Velocity such a blast to look at. Aiding all of this are the game's story cutscenes. A handful of these, at the start and end mostly, are done in real big-money CG, as far as I can tell, by the same studio as Ace Combat 5. They've got the same odd charm to them, leaning into this slight bit of stylization and exaggeration. Most of the cutscenes seem to have been animated and captured in-engine, though. They suffer a bit for their lower quality and heavy aliasing, but the animation within them still tends to be pretty fun to watch. Gordon's always full of energy. We love Gordon. The biggest sacrifice Critical Velocity has to make is frame rate, running at a stable 30 FPS. Very stable though, I never noticed any drops, so it works out. Always felt very smooth and easy to track to me, and I can be kinda sensitive about this stuff. Wouldn't mind seeing some kind of crazy modern port that unlocks the frame rate though. Now, we've talked about the wheels and the roads, but what about the people on them? Saul and Gordon are a pair of young punks, and they need cash. They need work. The only work they know how to do, though, is driving. And so they drive for fun and profit. The early going of the game steadily introduces each member of our slowly growing cast. Saul, our wheels and pedals in this story, is easily the more punkish of the two.
じゃあ俺たちが犯人捕まえてやるよ
Brash and aloof, Gordon's always alluding to the different kinds of trouble he manages to land the two in. Gordon himself always tends to handle the more managerial tasks of the two.
はい、スパイクホークストーマー事務所。
He's not above goofing off in his own way, though.
いいかソウル、俺たちはこの町に来て日が浅い。依頼を選ぶ余裕はねえだろ。
Initially acting as a thorn in their back is local police detective Hartman.
それじゃあ隣町で暴れてたストーマーってのは貴様らか
He's always trying to book the two for some kind of traffic violation, and always having to stomp away in embarrassment when people look at him like he's the bad guy, or something more important comes up. As Spike Hawk make a name for themselves helping out the innocent, however, he's slowly forced to warm up, even being the one to request their services when dealing with a precarious hostage situation.
へえいいのかい俺たちが受けても
犯人の指示に背けば人質が危険だ人命が最優先だからな
Navigating this job, Saul becomes acquainted with Guy, an unsavory, high-ranking member of the local gang, Old Roger. This guy sucks so much he literally shoots a dog, and then brags about shooting the dog.
いい銃だろう犬っころ相手にはもったいない
After him, Saul has a close encounter with his cohort, an unbelievably skilled mystery driver. You can't have a PS2-era Namco game storyline without a good rival. They're later joined by their third goon, Miranda. She doesn't do much. With these enemies and half-allies on their backs, it's a relief that Saul and Gordon have two pairs of friendly eyes watching out for them. After some initial meetings and misunderstandings with those money-hungry mystery drivers from the beginning, Hope and Deanna, otherwise known as the Stormer group Belle the Cat, Saul learns of the circumstances behind Hope's fixation on money, her conflict between wanting to pay off her departed father's debts to get his old office back, and wanting to live for herself, and he and Gordon form bonds of friendship and camaraderie with the two.
でも仕事では手加減しないから。
俺だって
Of course, last but not least are Clara, Hartman's junior at the police station, a kind-hearted young woman who believes in the good hearts of our heroes and aids them at every opportunity.
先輩があんな簡単に折れるのは珍しいんです。お二人のこと認めてるんですよ。
Pat, the local info dealer, a young girl slumming it out with her pet dog Tina, and who develops a sort of admiration for the veterinarian field while growing into a crucial friend and ally of the group.
ティナの命はお金で買えないもん。
And Williams, Hartman's old friend and commissioner of police. He is very kind and polite. But could he have a darker secret?
私は死刑のウィリアムスです。
What starts out as a series of clashes and misunderstandings escalates pretty quickly into an all-out battle for truth and justice. Old Roger aiming for our heroes' heads at every turn, from making attempts on their life to framing them for murder. Yeah, they just get a car that's apparently similar to whatever one you're driving, and Hartman immediately buys that it was us, because someone told him there was a fat guy in the car, and he has to apologize, when this turns out not to be effective evidence of our guilt. Nice going, man. It all comes to a head when an attempt to arrest Guy goes horribly wrong, revealing the name of our master mystery driver.
そんなグリフィン
When Miranda baits Hope out to the factory district to kill her with a time bomb, it gets clear that the gang has to work together to take these guys down before anyone really gets hurt. If you care about spoilers, I'll be spoiling the entire rest of the plot. There's no translation for this game, though. I think even if you know what happens, this game's less about the mysteries, and more about the ride itself, and it's a very fun ride. With everyone on the same page, they have a clear goal: find Griffin. Hartman's got a good lead on that, and having earned his trust, he invites the boys out to help nab this creep. Unfortunately, in the end, it turns out this operation had some small leaks. Hartman loses faith in the pair, not wanting to accept that it could have been anyone else who leaked the operation, and a bit of a rift opens up in the group once again. Spikehawk aren't about to leave the old man to mope around on his own, though. They do their best to keep helping him out and ultimately manage to patch things up. In between, they have their first face-to-face meeting with Griffin.
ようこそ
He's taken a liking to Saul and wants to have him by his side, under threat of death and terrorism. Challenging Saul and Gordon to defuse a car bomb he planted into the city, the two make it just in time to dump it in the water after doing a pretty crazy slide.
ご苦労なことだな。私の部下にならないなら今後もこういうことが続くぞ。てめえ！
俺たちが狙いなら一般人には手を出すな。
いつから正義の味方になったんだ。
For their second meeting with Griffin in the desert, Gordon comes prepared, prompting one of my favorite exchanges in the game.
ソウル、私の元へ来る気になったか。
その話は済んだはずだ。俺はストーマンを辞める気はない。
ならば死んでもらうしかないな。
そう来ると思ったぜ。
そんなものいつの間に。
こんな時丸腰で来るバカはお前ぐらいだぜ。
銃は俺の性に合わない。
そんなに車が好きか、ソウル。ではどうせなら楽しもうか。
Though Saul wins Griffin's little challenge again, this time Griffin's playing dirty.
お前たちの勝ちだ。商品は自由、そして死だ。
ープ、どうしてここへ？
助けられるばかりじゃ不公平よ。私もソウルを助ける。
Hartman arrives just in time, both to save their lives and give them his apology for ever doubting them.
そんなことよりお前たちに謝りたい。俺はそのために来た。
喋るな、傷が。
情報をグリフィンに流したのはお前らじゃなかった。すまん、誤解で。
もういいよ、だから喋るな。
ここだ。しけた面すんな、小僧。
When the gang see Clara crying outside the hospital some days later, they're forced to come to grips with this sad and shocking turn of events.
先輩が私が来た時にはもう。
そんな。
これ先輩が俺に何かあったらソウルたちに渡せって。
俺はグリフィンを追ううちに大きな敵に出会ってしまった。危険な捜査だから一人でやるつもりだ。
先輩ひどい。私に黙って。
誤解したことすまなかった。まだ俺を友と呼んでくれるか。お前たちとの出会いに感謝している。
グリフィンを操る黒幕が存在するのね。
お
それ先輩愛用の銃です。誰にも触らせなかったのに。
Despite saying guns don't suit him, Saul accepts Hartman's gun. Accepting it as the last will of his friend, everyone gathers together to fight their departed allies' battle to the bitter end. And one final decisive race with Griffin, he ultimately crashes his car, sustaining fatal wounds. Though Miranda cries out and attempts to shoot Saul in revenge, Griffin ends up being the one to put a bullet in her back. He won't hand Saul to anyone else, even if this is his own end. With his dying breath, he reveals that the mastermind behind all of this was none other than Police Commissioner Williams!
お前は私に勝った唯一の男だ。誰にも手は出させん。お前は私に似ている、ソウル。
俺はあんたとは違う。
それでいい。情報を流していたのはウィリアムスだ。
ウィリアムス所長が？
金で親友を裏切るのか。何がおかしい？
いや、もっと早くお前たちに出会っていれば。
こいつはただ孤独だっただけで気の合う相棒でもいればな。
With nothing other than this unrecorded bit of testimony, Saul and Gordon rush in to confront Williams, only to need Belle the cat to come in and rescue them, while fleeing together to find a good hiding spot, until Clara can uncover the final piece of decisive evidence that will prove Williams' guilt. This happens shockingly fast, and the disgraced commissioner flees out into an abandoned old factory in the city. After navigating all the tight, cramped corners to chase him down, Saul and Gordon have one final, intense confrontation with Williams, which, well, it gets kinda nuts.
だが死ぬのはお前だ。
あんた生まれついてのゲス野郎だな。
私だって理想に燃えた頃はあった。だが人生のコースは街の道路よりも複雑でな。お前たちも道連れにしてやる。
まずい、脱出しよう。
Though they seemed like goners for a minute, Saul and Gordon end up crawling out of the rubble alive and mostly unharmed. The day is saved! A few days later, Saul and Gordon are preparing to head out. The life of a stormer can't easily be confined to just one little city. But before they're even able to take one step out of town, Hope and Deanna come in, announcing their plans for future partnership with the two. If that wasn't enough, even Clara's here, having quit the Force with the intent of studying under Saul. And if that wasn't enough... Wait, could it be?
ちょっとあれ
ハートマン死んだはずじゃ。
死んだって言ったのか？
私そんなこと一言も。
病院の前で泣いてただろ。
だって面会謝絶になってたんですよ。先輩に会えないと悲しくってつい。
じゃあ俺たち何のために。
まよかったじゃない。
In the end, even Pat comes out to say hello, having dressed out of her dirty old street clothes and given up her life as an information broker to become a vet. I guess her information dealing got her enough funds to dress up for whatever veterinarian school she's off to enroll in.
待ってくれ、俺も行く。
I love this game, man. Maybe there's better open-world driving games out there, but there's no other Critical Velocity. It's just such an immensely silly and lighthearted time. The driving is really fun, the mission design never hits any valleys so deep I stopped enjoying it, and the story is a total blast. It's got a lovable cast, and every scene is a joy to watch, with its really dorky and cheesy sense of humor and over-the-top drama. It's just a whole-ass ride from start to finish, and one I was delighted to finally go on. And it's a bit sad that this game serves as kind of a swan song for this era of Namco. The Bandai merger was a very recent thing at the time, and while its biggest effects wouldn't be seen for a few more years, it's impossible to argue the shift in output from 2005 to 2008 was anything less than radical in the uncool sense. They wouldn't end up releasing another one-off as cool as Critical Velocity for the rest of the decade. 2006 was in a very real sense the last year either Ace Combat or Ridge Racer would really have another proper traditional entry that felt true to the original tone, style, and identity of the respective franchises, at least until someone at Project Aces pulled whatever miracle got Ace Combat 7 greenlit in 2019. Ridge Racer came close to slipstreaming into its own return, but not in a way Bandai Namco ever publicly announced or even acknowledged, having smothered it to death behind closed doors around the launch of the Switch. In a very real sense, Idolmaster was the last gasp of 2000s Namco in creating a new franchise that would last the ages, but that one's a topic for another time. But hey, Critical Velocity's still here, and you can still play it. So if you like this kind of goofy, arcadey old experiment of a game as much as I do, it's one I can very easily say is worth playing at least once.